Alright, all you RC addicts out there, today I have another video on the Losi LST XXL 2, and what's going to be on today is all the goods and the bads that I found out about this thing by my 2 months plus of experience bashing, playing with it, tuning it, replacing the chassis on it. I've done a lot with this thing so far, and I think now I'm well versed in telling you what is good and bad about it. So first thing I'm going to start with is the actual starter motor. Little starter, handheld starter for it. Works great, tons of torque, nice little strap on it, super strong. Only bad thing about it is it takes a 6-cell nickel metal battery in here, and the biggest one I could fit in here would be an 1800 milliamps. So what I think I'm going to do is put one of my old 2S LiPo 7.4 volt 5000 milliamp hard case packs in here, and I'll be able to extend the runtime of this thing. Basically this thing lasts, now it's getting cold out, I would say with the car flipping a couple times and dying out, it lasts probably 2 tankfuls, I would say, before it's too low a battery in here to actually start the engine, because it takes a little while when the engine is cold to get it first started, and that's when you really need this thing to be powered up. So I think I'm going to be doing that. Besides that, this thing works absolutely great. And we'll go on to the radio now. The radio on here, the transmitter itself works great. All the buttons are clear and concise on here. You got your steering and your throttle right here, so you can do quick adjustments of it. And up here is your active vehicle control, so you can turn it off or turn it up a little bit or put it on full max. Whatever you want to do. Range is great, looks great, takes 4 AA batteries like any other 2.4 gigahertz radio nowadays. And let's focus real quick. And the steering and throttle reversing switches are right here, bind buttons right there. So overall, this thing works absolutely great, looks great. The steering wheel on here has a good feel to it, good return spring in there. Overall, a good entry-level radio to come with it. Now the body on here is nice and thick, like I said in the unboxing video. It feels super strong. You can see I was skidding on the roof a couple times, and I think it's a very high quality body that I've had zero problems with as far as chunking off any pieces or body posts coming through or anything like that. And I've had this thing clipping along pretty good and doing some good flips and skidding on the lid, of course, as you can see, and zero problems with this. Now, onto the truck itself. We're going to go from the back to the front, and then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to go from the back to the front again. All the good things I found, all the parts I've broken, all the little tricks that I've found also through use on here. So starting from the back, zero problems with the suspension, or the shocks, the diffs, the bumper. Everything is super, super solid back here. CV shafts, nice and thick. They're not even bent or anything, so they're super strong. I love it. So we're going to go on to the fuel tank now. The fuel tank's nice and strong, has a good size capacity to it, so that it can run. For my runtime video I ran it for about 30 minutes straight. If I was a little more easy on the throttle, I could probably get this thing to run for about 35 minutes. So this thing has the right amount of capacity for this engine, so it's perfect, it's strong. And these tubes right here, I had zero problems with them as far as like pinching or rubbing on the exhaust and having problems coming off. No problems like that. And them not being a clear line like some were complaining about has not been an issue for me. I don't need to see the lines on there as far as if there's fuel coming through the prime or not. The one problem I have with this fuel tank is the cap. The cap is super strong. It's got a nice handle on here, I guess you could say, so you can take it off of there. Super strong. I love it. Only bad thing is the gasket / stopper inside of here. When you're loosening it like that, and you got to tighten it pretty good like I had it, so that there's no fuel leakage, and so of course it can keep pressure inside of here. This stopper, so you're loosening it, right? you're loosening it, well, the stopper stays attached to the tank itself. Therefore, it starts to come out, and then you fill the tank, and then you go put it back in. You have fuel leakage, and you can't get pressure in the tank and everything else because this thing keeps coming out of there. So you just have to be mindful that whenever you do a fuel fill up, which isn't too often, like I said, this thing lasts pretty long, before you put it back on, tighten it back in until it stops, and then cap it off. Otherwise, leak-free, perfect, no problems at all with that. Engine. I've had zero problems with this engine. Some of the early adopters that got it in June-July time frame had connecting rod problems with the piston in there where it would come apart where it connects to the crankshaft itself. This one is from September, so maybe I got an earlier build, and I also bought it straight from Horizon Hobby. So maybe I got the latest and greatest off the shelves in their warehouse. I don't know, but I did buy a later build, and I've had zero problems with the base engine on here. Air filter. Good air filter. It's out of the way. I like it. I'm not going to get a Dusty's outerwears or anything like that on here. I'm just going to use a stock setup, and I'm going to clean this outer pre-filter on here every other run or so, and with detergent, and then I'll oil it, and I figure it's just part of the actual maintenance of an engine overrunning electric, so it's no big deal to me. So I'll be doing that instead of an outerwears because some people were saying they're still getting tons of dust in it with the outerwear, so I'm not dealing with it. Yeah, so the engine, zero problems, even with the spark plug that many were complaining about falling out, or there's a little spark plug button inside of there underneath the spark plug. No problems with that either. Nothing coming apart. And no leaks. Zero problems all around with the actual engine. It's been a great engine. It's tons of power. It screams. It's loud. I love it. So I have no gripes about that at all. Slipper clutch and clutch bell. Clutch bell, zero problems. Slipper clutch, zero problems. Transmission works great. Super flawless. No leaks. No gearing problems in here. There's a 2-speed centrifugal type deal on the outside here. I think it's centrifugal for the 2-speed transmissions, as to where it actually shifts, the point where it just shifts. I've had it in there stock from the factory, whatever they set it at, and it shifts to second gear. No problem. I think it comes on at the right time. And I've also had zero problems with the nut on the slipper clutch on here backing off. So overall, the the slipper clutch, everything very, very solid on here. Throttle servo, zero problems with the linkage, everything, zero problems. The brake on here is properly adjusted, and when I hit that brake, this thing will almost flip over. It has such a good brake on here, so that's definitely a good setup. Nothing has come loose on me, and nothing has failed me yet. On to the ignition module. Some of the early adopters also had problems with these things just quitting on them. 7 tankfuls now, maybe going on to my 8th one now. Zero problems with this. The wire, no problems, and you can see I even, while tuning, flipped this a couple times, and it dragged across the head and the wire here where it goes onto the spark plug. No problems at all. Nothing is giving me an issue. Okay, let's go up to the receiver. Now you can see in the receiver, we'll attack this since it's right on top. This battery pack powers your CDI module, your servos, your receiver, all that stuff on here. So this is the pack that comes with it, and it's bolted on underneath in the belly there. It's a real pain to get to. You should be taking it off each time to charge it. It is a LiPo pack, so then you got to unscrew 4 screws each time to get it out of there, and then each time you put it back in there, you have to fish wires through this little crevice right here to get it up and over here to connect to the power cable for the receiver. And when doing so, you're over here after the run, this pipe is smoking hot, and you're over here, and then you end up burn yourself in the pipe right here because it's right in this area is where it connects up usually. Now mine is over here now, and I put the pack on here with double-sided, well, Velcro on there, industrial strength Velcro, and it fits perfectly right here at the end of the top of the battery box. And I've had zero problems with that as far as, being the weight being up higher and throwing off the center of gravity, no issues. This truck weighs over 18 pounds and this pack weighs barely anything. I'm not worried about it. I went out and drove it, didn't change anything else, and it's like it's not even there. So this is basically where it should have been in the first place, up away from all the muck underneath, because if you start driving around, this thing is basically waterproof, you're going to start getting your balance connector all corroded up in there, and you won't be able to balance charge it anymore, being underneath there. And I plan on driving this in the winter with the salt and all that stuff from the streets might get up in there, and that'll cause big problems real quick. So that's what I did with this. I put the balance connector over here. There's a pin right here for adjusting the body mount, the post. Well, I just put it through there to keep it up and out of the way. It looks good to me, and it works just fine, and that keeps it from dangling. So that's what I'm probably going to do with that. And then the other side, the power wire right here, I ran through the eyelet right here for the hinge for the lid, and then it plugs in right here. Right? Perfect. And that's the best solution I found. This does not get in the way of anything. The switch is on the side here still. Your pin for over here for opening it up is away from it. It's perfect, and it's not near the engine or the fuel tanks. That's a good idea also. And also, back here, this is where all the weight's at. This thing actually squats a little bit in the back. So any weight up here is only going to even it out anyway. So this is a great solution, and that's why I did with that. I was not dealing with that being underneath anymore. Okay, since we're talking about the battery, the radio box. Radio box, great, works fine. I didn't put it through too much water. You get to see how waterproof it is. It's supposed to be waterproof as far as, you know, splashing around in the snow and puddles and all that stuff. But the way it overlaps the flange on here, I'm sure it's waterproof enough. And so zero problems with that. The receiver inside of here, the actual receiver, this thing died on me first day. I was over here starting the engine, trying to start for the very first time. Oh, this is awesome, awesome, awesome. Everything was powered up. I could steer. Everything was just fine, right? Thing just dies on me. Throttle servo goes a full max. Never came back. Of course, Horizon Hobby replaced it for free. How could they deny it? But still, it made me a little leery of their Spectrum radio setup when I'm used to the rock solid Traxxas stuff. I love this. And I actually ran my Traxxas stuff from my Summit in here until that receiver came back. Up here in the front, no problems. Bumper, super strong. It's hitting boulders, rock boulders, all kinds of stuff. No problems with that. These shocks on here, super beefy. I talked about them during the unboxing. No problems with them. I did hit a boulder. It was a pretty good hit. It wasn't so bad. I didn't crack anything else up here. But what was weird, let's see if I can show you on here. There we go. Spring, fine. Cup down here, fine. The actual eyelet didn't crack. Arm, fine. The shaft itself sheared right off flush with this eyelet down here. Very weird failure. I don't know if it was a hardening issue, but I've recently got a whole new setup of shocks on here, and I've had zero problems since. And it was not during a cold spell. It was about 60, 70 degrees outside. Okay, so like many others have said, let me focus here again for you guys. The engine, absolutely great. A lot of other guys are talking about that. As soon as you flip the truck over, this thing just dies out. Not the case for me. I've had it flipped over for a couple minutes, and not a couple minutes. I would say up to 30 seconds. By the time I get over, the thing's still running. If you're worried about it flooding out and dying out or whatever the issue is, give it a couple blips of the throttle, and it will actually keep it running for you. But I've don't really have to do it too often, and it stays running for me, which is a great thing to not have to deal with starting it every time I flip the truck, because it happens quite often the way I drive. Speaking of, let's talk about it right now. Handling on this thing, because it's so wide of a track on here and the big old tires on here, this thing actually likes to bounce around when it does the flips. it's flipping, it's going all crazy, flipping over, maybe doing cartwheels. Because these tires are so big and the track width is so big, so wide, it actually likes to flip over and land on its feet a lot more times than you think. It's a very well balanced chassis on here, so I love that fact. You can have a cool flip and your thing goes bah, 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 and you just take off again. It's a lot of fun that way. Before I forget, let's not forget about this. This was my biggest pet peeve from the beginning. Now this right here, the pressure hose, like I said, doesn't really get in the way. You can stick your thing in here to start it, no big deal. What you're doing, you're trying to stick it through the hole in the body or otherwise, and you're at an angle going down to it. So you're rubbing right here on the exhaust pipe. No big deal. I can deal with the rubbing on the exhaust pipe. But they put one of the springs that hold the exhaust pipe together right here. So you're spinning around, you're chewing into it each time, and you're at an angle, so you're resting on it. And this thing actually popped off my second or third run. So these springs are actually kind of expensive considering they're part of another kit on there. And I think they should have turned the whole thing on here so that there's a spring on this side and the other side and the bottom. Make that triangle of springs a little bit different so it's straight shot, or lower the pipe or something so you have a straight shot to that, because these things are popping off on you and breaking, quite early. So let's flip it over and talk about that. I know it's getting kind of long-winded on here. So what I did do is I broke the chassis. I broke it right in half. I cracked its back, let's say. And where I cracked it at was right here. Here's the engine, right? Here's the transmission. Well, I broke it right here on the plastic. And these metal skids, and up here the metal top plate of the chassis, just fine. I broke these long pieces on the side here. Boom, boom, right here. So I had to replace the whole chassis on there because of the way it is on there, and the way I bought it was actually cheaper to buy the whole new chassis. So that was kind of my fault because I was out tuning it, therefore I had the body off, and I made a decent flip and went like this. Boom. And it landed on the high point, which was the head right here, and like I said, it's pretty heavy. So this end and this end were crashing to the ground, and the center of the chassis right here, the head, was not giving. Therefore, weakest link right here, plastic, cracked right in half. No big deal. It is a warning though, if you're out tuning it, run with the cover off. Be careful, don't get too crazy out there because you flip this thing without the body on and you're liable to break the chassis quite quick. And again, it was 60, 70 degree weather, it was not cold frigid temperatures. So let's go back down to the bottom here. So like I said before, I was worried about all this open carcass, the cavities down here and stuff like that. Hasn't been an issue so far. These servos are untouched. This servo's untouched, the horns, the linkage, no problems. You can actually see up here my skid plate, that's the original skid plate, it barely has any damage on it. Same with this one, of course this one's raised up in there and this one's new. But this one's original, and this one back here you can see is really chewed up. That's where it gets all the brunt of it back here. But this aluminum's super tough and it just kind of takes it and chunks off, and there's nothing back here to actually break. Whereas up here, so you hit something and it kind of skids over it and may hit back here. See what I mean, like a boulder or whatever. So far so good. And that battery was right here before, okay? Right there, horrible spot for it. And then you fish the wires up through and you're taking it out, these 4 little screws. Real pain. I suggest as soon as you get it to put the battery up top like I did. It's worked out perfect for me. This was a stupid spot to put it in. Drivetrain, zero problems. Super beefy, no problems with it as far as them bending or breaking or screws coming out or anything like that. Everything's super smooth on here. All the drivetrain on here, no problem. Bumpers, like I said, A-arms haven't cracked yet, and you can see I've been using the heck out of it. So my biggest thing I've done on here so far was break the chassis, and like I said, it's pretty much my fault because you look at it from a side profile, what's the highest? And you better believe this engine's not giving. so everything else did. Now, as far as these needle settings on here for the high and the low speed needles on here, I've seen my original book said like 1721. It was like 1721 was the original manual. I just downloaded the manual from Losi again. It said actually like it was like 1830 now. What I found works best, and some other reviewers, is 15 up top works good, and then 30 down here turns out from you turn it all the way in until it stops, and then you back it out 30, and then you back it out 15, and this thing runs like crazy. It starts up good, it runs good, there's tons of power, it sounds good, it's not sputtering, no problems at all, and the spark plug's not falling out, so it's a great setting on there. One problem I have with this setting, and I don't know if that's going to be gone now that it's a lot cooler out, it's probably about 20 degrees outside, whereas before it was 70, 80 degrees, is once this engine got hot, and I do a little jump, or I let off the throttle a little bit and get a little bit of a shock, the idle would go too low, and it would actually kill the engine. That was a kind of a pain. It wouldn't happen too often. So I put these back at 15 and 30. It's cold out. I'm gonna try it. If it still continues to do it once the engine warms up, there will be a tuning video coming up. What I think is that it's running too rich, and once it gets hot, just like a real engine, like the Fords I work on, once they get hot, they don't need the mixture to be so rich. So if it's too rich and it's hot and it floods out somehow, when I do the jump or whatever, it's gonna happen. So I gotta find the happy medium if this still occurs once I get it out there and start testing again. Because I've had it off the shelf, out of service, I guess you could say, for a while now, changing that chassis out. That was a real pain. But it's back together. Everything got back together correctly, and I think it's better than ever. Now, today was one of my first days back out and running this thing, okay? And it's about 22 degrees outside right now, and it's been, I'd say 3 weeks or so since I ran this last, and I was getting frustrated with the chassis replacement and all that stuff, and I don't know if it's worth it. I don't know. You know what? I put these things back at 15 and 30. I put it all together. I put it together right, and I drove that thing today, and I had tons of fun with the thing. It was just so powerful. It was so aggressive sounding. The dogs love to go chase it. I'm still absolutely happy that I bought this thing, and I look forward to tuning it out to the max I can get out of this engine, and for the aftermarket to come along, maybe make a a nicer tuned pipe for it also. But that's about it. I wanted to go over it. I know this has kind of been long-winded, but there's a lot of information I want to get out there to potential owners, and also first-time buyers of this, just bought this or is getting this for Christmas or whatever. These are all the points you need to look at.